Hello everyone, if you've been following all the video game stuff on my channel, you know that at starting the end of last year, so basically through Christmas time and into this year, I've been playing the Yakuza series. I originally just played 1 and 2, and was replayed those, and I've been starting them with 0, and going through the whole franchise. That's been sort of my big video game tackle this year, and my goal was to try and catch up with the series completely. All the ones have been released in English on the PS4, at least before Xenoblade Chronicles 3 hits. And as you know, that was being announced. It was announced to be released several months early. It's coming out in about a little over a month now at this point. So, yeah, I've been trying to get through, and I'm just about done. I'm eventually gonna make a playlist of all these if you haven't seen those, because I try and talk few spoilers as possible and just briefly about my experience and my thought with each game as I go through. And at the very end, I'm going to talk a little more in detail and do a ranking of the whole series up to that point and get through it. So I have 2 to talk about today. I'm almost caught up. Last time that I was on here, I talked about 5 and 6, and I finished recently Like a Dragon 7, and then Judgment, the spin-off series that's been starting on the PS4, and then I'll be moving on to next Lost Judgment. I'll probably be starting that this weekend, probably later today. I'm going to install it and check it out. So, and this just released in 2021, so the most recent game in the franchise. I'll be caught up, which is good because we are on the cusp of an announcement. We know they're working on several new games for the series, and this summer at some point they're going to reveal and announce what the next game is going to be. I think it's going to be a sequel to Like a Dragon. I definitely think that they're going to be doing a sequel to Like a Dragon, either a third Judgment game or something more in that vein, and then a third one which is going to be a mystery. I think that's what we'll be seeing within the next 2 to 3 years. Anyway, to start off with Like a Dragon, the journey of Ichiban, a very different protagonist than what we're used to in the majority of the series, a more comedic, lighthearted tone, and the story of his life and his great sacrifice for what he considers to be his family, and the heartbreaking betrayal, and then the mystery that he gets involved with that, and it's really his personal journey in trying to become a hero. And this is really a game that is set up to start a new era of the franchise with him as the leader. It really seems to be a build up. This is him becoming the hero, becoming himself, solving the mysteries of his life, and really becoming who he's going to be. And then later games, it takes off from there with a great supporting cast. This is such a weird experience for me because if you put the franchise down just on paper, you look through the Wikipedia descriptions of what these games are, I would say, hands down, this should be my favorite in the entire franchise. Because, if you're someone who watches my channel, you know that my favorite type of video game is a turn-based RPG. That, since the original Final Fantasy on the NES, that was my introduction back in the late 80s, early 90s on the NES. Ever since then, my entire life, that has been my favorite style of game, is the turn-based RPG. And implementing that along with the Yakuza franchise, which I have completely fallen head over heels in love with. I've always loved those first 2 on the PS2. It's all I had played for over a decade, and just getting into the rest of the games, the whole thing on PS4, it's one of my favorite franchises. It's up there, right behind things like Final Fantasy and the Xeno games and Shin Megami Tensei. It's up there as one of my favorite franchises. Amazing. So this is just the perfect combination of everything. But it's not my favorite. It's actually probably near the bottom, might be my least favorite. That's not to say I don't like it. That's the one thing that's amazing that I'll be talking about definitely more in depth when I do my big overview of the franchise. I have not encountered a single one of these games, all the ones that are on the PS4 in English. I've not encountered a single one that I disliked. I like every single game to one degree or another. And Like a Dragon was fantastic, and I loved the very different tone and the style of the turn-based gameplay, and I like how they handled all of it too, explaining it and the structure of it, because Ichiban's fantasy is Dragon Quest. He's almost schizophrenic in his obsession with the way he perceives things, like through this lens of him becoming the hero. Even like he encounters some legacy characters. When he encounters Kiryu, he perceives him as a literal dragon, and he's fighting. He's not insane, but he's just his way of mentally working through things, and through this lens, and this way he guides his life is through the idea of the traditional like Dragon Quest style JRPG, and that is kind of the way that he's perceiving things is how they explain the very Dragon Quest style to like the turn-based combat and things. It really works very well narratively, and it's also funny, and it's also just endearing, and they did a good job, especially for the first real outing as a turn-based RPG. This is one of my favorite turn-based RPGs on the PS4. Like I said, it's really, really good. Really well done, maintains the feel of the series, just a slightly different tone, but really great mini games as well. I even enjoyed some of the more simplistic ones, like watching movies in the movie theater and trying not to fall asleep. It's a very simple, kind of silly thing, but it's a lot of fun. There's a lot in there. The summons, good, again, the supporting cast of characters, and very different from what you're used to, because you're used to these superhumans, these crazy, over-the-top, melodramatic, like I'm gonna tackle a tiger, like two tigers with my bare hands kind of characters, versus these are more the everyman, and like the entire team together struggles to handle like one tiger at one point, because it's a different view of this world, and the underdog story, and it's really cool getting that perspective, and I enjoyed that so much. And the only things that I don't even have any actual complaints, just in explaining why it's one of my least favorites, is that it didn't connect with me quite the same way as the other games in the series. It's like a personal taste thing. Like looking at this as, objectively as possible, there's nothing that I really have a complaint about. It's really, really good. I love the new city, and it's massive and really well structured, and all the mini games and things that are involved feel like they have purpose. Fantastic, but it didn't connect with me in the exact same way. I enjoyed the cast of characters, but in the rest of the franchise, and then we'll talk more in Judgment in a minute here, I had felt much more of a personal connection to a lot of the stories of those characters, and personality-wise, like I felt a deep connection to some of those characters, and here I enjoyed all the characters, but I didn't feel that deep connection, that personal connection where I liked them, but it wasn't. It was fun in going through their journey and well written, but I felt a greater sense of connection whenever a legacy character would show up. There are, without spoiling the context, some mini cameos of like Daigo and Sejima and Goro and Kiryu, and in those few moments that you see those characters, like I don't know, I felt I was drawn to them immediately in those scenes and away from the new cast. Like I was drawn to those people, and I don't know, I just like those characters more. And even some of the later side people like Akiyama and stuff, like I really like those people. This cast is great. It's just very different feel, a very different tone. It's a different, and I like that it's a different angle on that world, but that angle didn't capture me quite the same way. And again, the turn-based combat and everything is really well done. I have no complaints, and that's my favorite type of game. But weirdly, it's my least favorite gameplay in the Yakuza series. Like I don't know, I like the way they've done over the years and the different evolutions of the style, this very arcade kind of beat 'em up thing. Starts very different in 1 and 2, and it's more fluid in things like 6, but a different feel, and it's different through each game, but I don't know, I've really become engrossed in that, and there's sort of this aggressiveness that's missing from this one. It's a little more toned down. It's not in the way that its drama is portrayed is a little bit less violent soap opera. It really has a lot of those elements still, but it's not quite as, it reaches this point where the other games would eventually just go beyond that point into the ridiculous, but in a way that I like. It's a very different style, and I like it and appreciate it, but at the same time, it just wasn't as strong for me. And then, so it wasn't a disappointment, but it's something different, but it's near the bottom for me. I really like it, but it just doesn't connect with me the same way as the other games in the series. And I was a little worried then going into Judgment, because again, it's a different perspective on the world. You're playing Yagami, who is a disgraced lawyer turned private detective, and it is, again, so then it's a different take on the world, and it includes a lot of detective elements and a lot more stealth elements, following someone, gathering clues. You actually have to do a little bit, you have to really pay attention to a lot of things that you're doing with detective work, because you have to select the right evidence to show when interviewing someone or at a trial, a court case. And again, it's a different perspective, and after the experience of Like a Dragon, which again I really liked, but just not quite to the same level as 0 through 6, I was like, okay, so this is going to be probably a similar experience where I enjoy it, but not quite to the level as other games. Totally wrong. This is one of my favorites in the entire franchise. I'm actually very curious when I go through and I kind of rethink everything as I've been doing, as I've been going, where this is going to be placed, because it's going to be high. At least the top half of the games, without question. It's going to be high, because this is incredible. This really blew past any of my expectations for it. Talking about these together, Like a Dragon, as I said, enjoyed the characters, but didn't feel that real personal connection to them. The connection came right back for me in Judgment. I was as connected with these new cast of characters as I was for the cast of all the older games with the OG crowd, the legacy characters. I felt immediately connected to their stories and was drawn in. And again, it takes a very, Like a Dragon is a little lighter in its approach to its humor, a little more magical. Judgment's a little more gritty and grounded, and again is a different feel than 0 through 6. But these, that's why I like these as a pair, and I hope these both kind of continue, because they are, you have 0 through 6. The main is like right here, and these they branch off from that in slightly different directions, and I like having that variety and those different perspectives of the world. And this to me is one of the best. This is easily, so far, as totally Lost Judgment, but just in terms of story and character, 100% top 3 in the series so far for me, easily. Just fantastic. I loved the mystery, and it was complex without being convoluted, which some people complain some of the Yakuza games, they get a little too ridiculous, and like body doubles, and he's shot and he's dead, or wait, he's not dead, and all this. There's just so much going on where it's very soap opera. This feels much less like that, more gritty crime drama, and I felt super engrossed in everything that was going on. The development of the dementia drug, and the murders, and the cover-ups, and the political ties, and I love the way, without spoiling anything again, it's tied to an original case that really led to the downfall, and why the main character becomes, leaves behind kind of his world of being a lawyer to become a detective. That's actually, it's not like a side thing, that it's not just redemption, it's intricately tied into the web of what is going on years later. And it's just fantastic, and exploring the backstories of all these different characters as you go along and their connections. I really loved this game, and the gameplay was fantastic. It was very true, the Yakuza style, but unique enough, especially the detective stuff, and flying the drone around and doing all those things was really, really cool and implemented well. That's one thing I would like to see expanded, though, that I'm hoping in Lost Judgment, is I think that this could be improved as the series with that character goes on, or that style, with actually getting a little more in depth with the detective stuff, and pull back a little bit from some of the more traditional action beat 'em up style. Like, it still is a necessary portion, but make the percentage of the game that you spend being a detective, or the percentage of the game that you are in the courtroom presenting evidence and stuff, make that a little bit greater. Actually have that take over a little bit more. I think that would make, separate this even more from the rest of the franchise and be really, really good. But that's how great this is that the only thing I'd like to see is a little bit more of what it does differently than the other games. So that's really just high marks for Judgment, and it's one There's a huge standalone too. You don't have to have played any of the other games. You're not going to really miss much of anything if you've never played them. Like a Dragon, it definitely stands on its own completely, but I feel like you get so much more when the original cast of people show up for little cameos, or even just a greater understanding of the politics of the underground of this world. You get more, I think, out of it if you've played the previous games. And the one thing that could be improved with that game, talking about improvements, is some of the pacing is a little bit off, and there twice in the game when these legacy characters showed up, there's a ridiculous difficulty spike where it pretty much requires you to spend time leaving and either grinding at a tower that's, I think it was 30 levels to go through, or do tons of side quests, because they just out of nowhere, you need to be like 10 levels higher at the points. And it wasn't just me, I looked it up, because the first one, when there's an encounter with Goro and Sojima, and to that point I thought the game was almost too easy, and then I just got floored, like just leveled. And then it happened again with Kiryu. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And a lot of people seen that same issue where there were these weird, inconsistent, just these crazy difficulty spikes out of nowhere. And tonally, I feel like they struggled a little bit with balancing the new gameplay style with the pacing of the narrative. Really good narrative, really well written, but I think that is something that is underestimated with a lot of these turn-based RPGs, is somehow with that slower paced style of the combat and the more frequent encounters and things, making the narrative poorly with that, I think, is a little more of an art style than people realize. And seeing this in comparison to the other games in the franchise, it has, needs to be reworked a little bit in future ones to keep that narrative pace going at a faster clip, I think. So little things like that could be, again, improved in whatever the next one's going to be, because I think that's the next one. So both of these were just great experiences. I love the different takes in this universe, and seeing the different angle, being the underdogs, the kind of people that you would just beat the crap out of by the dozen on the street in the other games, or being on the other side of the law in many cases, and being the detective. I love those elements. Both these, I liked that, getting a different take on that universe. So that is all I have to say for now about those, and moving on to Lost Judgment, I'll be caught up, and then they're going to announce what is coming next for the franchise, and it's just been a blast.